Week number 12. Number 12 on this one for practice exams. Let's jump right into it. We're going to do Network Plus. I'm hoping to stump some of you. I really am. I'm really hoping to stump some of you on some of these questions. I'll be honest with you. I had a couple students reach out to me and go, "You're making it too easy. I got this. Too easy." And I'm like, all right, we'll see if we can't amp this up a little bit. See if we can't make it a little bit more difficult, more realistic in that aspect of it. 5 questions, as always, to try and help you pass that Network Plus exam. That's what we're doing today. Let's jump right into it. Let's get into it. Question number 1. A technician is troubleshooting an issue where devices on different subnets cannot communicate with each other. All devices are connected to the same layer 2 switch. What is most likely the cause of this issue? What's the most likely cause of this issue? What do you think? I feel like some of you have got this. I feel like you guys are going through and you're like, this isn't too difficult, Dr. K. It's not too difficult. I got this. I know what I'm doing here. What do you think? As always, we want to spend about 30 to 45 seconds on these questions. We really don't want to go over 45 seconds if we can help. A minute tops. Tops of a minute. Why? Because we want time for those performance-based questions at the very end. They're going to take some time. They're going to require you to do a little bit more. So much so that we can't even go through and really dive into PBQs that well on this type of format. But I try. All right, let's answer this one. If you need more time, as always, you can pause that video. A technician is troubleshooting an issue where devices on different subnets cannot communicate with each other. All devices are connected on the same layer 2 switch. What is the most likely cause of this issue? I feel like we can get rid of STP, spanning tree protocol. Not really something that has to do with the devices not being able to communicate with each other. And it's specifically talking about different subnets cannot communicate with each other. And I just don't feel like STP has anything to do with that, right? I feel like getting rid of the switch is running out of available ports. Because that's going to stop you from communicating. We're almost out of ports. I don't feel like that's going to be it. That leaves A or B. VLANs are not configured or incorrect default gateway settings. I think we know that if we had incorrect default gateway settings, that we wouldn't have access to the internet. And so not really a thing. It's going to be those VLANs. I feel like the VLANs is the only one. The key word here is the subnets. I feel like if you look at the different subnets and you're looking at VLANs, they kind of go hand in hand with each other. It kind of makes sense. But A is going to be the correct answer on this one. There we go. All right, question number 2. A network administrator needs to configure redundancy between 2 routers to ensure that traffic can fail over to the backup router if primary router goes down. Which of the following protocols is most appropriate for this configuration? I beat this into your head. I'm going to say it again. You gotta know the acronyms. You gotta know the acronyms. I'm not saying you have to memorize them, but you need to memorize what they do, right? That's the important point, right? I feel like if you don't know the acronyms, you're severely disadvantaged. I often tell students 30 to 40% of the exam, 30 to 40% of the exam is just knowing acronyms. I firmly believe that. And the reason I believe that is because you'll get a lot of questions like this one, where if you know what the acronym is, it answers the question. It literally is like, oh, I know what the acronym is, and so it must be this. And that's where this question comes into play. If you know the acronym, it is so easy. All right, let's jump into this one. If you need more time, as always, you can pause this video. Let's get rid of dynamic host control protocol. DHCP, of course, is not going to have anything to do with redundancy. That's more about if my IP addresses need to be established, and I'm doing a dynamic IP address rather than a static IP address. That's what I would come into play. DHCP doesn't really make sense. D is going to be out of there. I feel like we can get rid of simple network management protocol as well. We're not really doing any trapping in here. We're not really doing anything that has to do with SMNP. Definitely has nothing to do with failover to a backup router. That leaves HSRP or RIP. Well, if you know what RIP is, routing information protocol, right? That's the distance vector protocol used to determine the best path for travel across the network. Not really something for failovers, not really something for backups. However, hot standby router protocol, obviously something from the Cisco proprietary suite, but hot standby router protocol, that would obviously deal with the failover. So the answer is going to be B. It's going to be B. Pretty easy one if you knew what the acronym was. If you did it, you were probably struggling a little bit. With that. All right. Question number 3. A technician needs to configure a new network and wants to ensure that IP addresses are assigned dynamically, but the leases are distributed across multiple DHCP servers to provide fault tolerance. Which of the following should the technician configure? What should we configure if we want that IP address assigned dynamically, but the leases distributed across multiple DHCPs? What do you think? I feel like you've got this one. I feel like you know the answer, right? If you got it, you got it. If you don't, you don't. It's okay. What do you think? Let's dive into this one. Let's dive into it. I know I'm not wasting any time today. I'm trying to get the video short. Really, I had some complaints about 15-minute videos for 5 questions, and I get that. All right, let's answer this one. If you need more time, obviously you can pause it. Let's start with DHCP snooping. Yeah, I'm starting with D again. I feel like DHCP snooping in general, has nothing to do with ensuring that our IP addresses, let alone the leases across it, right? This is more of a security feature, right? Really more of ensuring that the traffic is unauthorized, is blocked. That's really where DHCP snooping comes into play, okay? I feel like we get rid of IP helper. Obviously, IP helper used to configure a router to forward DHCP requests, right? That's usually what an IP helper does. Not really something that we would use in this instance. That leaves relay and failover. If you know a failover, well, then you know the failover provides fault tolerance by allowing 2 or more DHCP servers to share responsibility for assigning IP addresses. And that would basically answer the question. That's what it is. It's going to be failover. It's going to be B. So why isn't it a relay? Why not a relay? Well, a relay allows those requests from the client on different subnets to a DHCP server, but does not provide fault tolerance, does not provide load balancing. Typically used with IP helper. Usually used with the IP helper, right? And so not something that we're doing with this instance. That way the question is going to be, there we go. It's going to be B. It's going to be the failover. All right, question number 4. We're going to take this one, right? Network administrator is troubleshooting slow performance on a web server and runs netstack command to analyze the network connections. The following output is displayed. Based on this output, which of the following should the administrator prioritize to address potential security issues? What do you think? I know. This one's a little bit. Now remember, when we get these types of questions, the way I like to do it, this is me when I'm taking certification exams or any multiple choice exam, is I'm literally doing process of elimination. I'm going to start with A or D, it doesn't matter which, and I'm going to start to remove all of them one at a time. I'm going to start going, okay, well, this doesn't make sense, or this doesn't make sense, or this doesn't make sense. And always, remember, we want to answer the question. Even if we have no clue what the answer is, we still want to answer it, because a 25% chance, i.e. 1 out of 4, is better than a 0% chance. If you run out of time or if you fail to answer the question, it's automatic loss. Automatically, you're going to get 0 points on that thing. So we want to at least try. I'd rather have a 25% chance of getting it right than a 0% chance. If I can eliminate 1, then my odds go to 33%. If I can eliminate 2, my odds go to 50%. And of course, if I can eliminate 3 in a 4 question, I know the answer. And so I have a 100% chance of getting it correct. Interesting question. All right, let's dive into this one. If you need more time, of course, pause it. A network administrator is troubleshooting slow performance on a web server and runs the netstack command to analyze network connections. The following output is displayed, and we can see that we've got a local IP address, all associated with the same server, right? 192.168.1.10, and then we have a foreign IP address. It doesn't appear that any of the foreign IP addresses are from the same machine. So we have a 5. We have a .22, a .50, a .27, and a .60. And we are seeing attached to this that we have HTTP, HTTPS, and we can see that right here, right? We can see that 80, that's HTTP, 443, right over here, HTTPS, and then we have a 22 over here, an SSH attached to it. Right. So let's start with A. Investigate SSH connection on port 22 for unauthorized access. Port 22 obviously being used on this one, and we see 198.51.100.60 operating, and we can see that right there. And it does have an established connection. Okay, yeah, possible. Let's move on to B. Terminate all connections in the time wait state to free up resources. So we have the time wait here on port 80 from this IP address, but I don't see any reason why we would do that. It doesn't. I think this is like a bone that it's throwing you. It's trying to lead you off track on this one. B, obviously not going to be correct. We don't really terminate connections in the time wait state, right? Not something we normally do. C, block all traffic from external IP addresses to port 80. And so they're basically saying shut down port 80, but it doesn't say that. It says block all traffic from external IP addresses. And so I think what it's saying is that we would block all these IP addresses, right? Let's see, block all traffic from external IP addresses to port 80. Yeah, I mean, you could take it either way. We can either turn off port 80 or you could block the IP addresses, in which case we'd be blocking 1, 2, 3. Not normally something we would utilize. I feel like this isn't a best answer. It's an okay answer. It says, based on the output, which of the following should the administrator prioritize to address potential security issues? So definitely a possibility, right? So we have A and we have C, both possibilities. D, investigate why the web server is allowing HTTP traffic on port 80 rather than enforcing HTTPS. Now, I like D more than I like C, because C just says we're going to block traffic from external IP addresses to port 80. So we're blocking it. Whereas D is we should investigate it. We don't shut it down just because. And so I like D rather than I like C. So I feel like we can get rid of C. All right, that leaves A and D. And so A, investigate the SSH connection on port 22 for unauthorized access. And then D, investigate why the web server is allowing HTTP traffic on port 80 rather than forcing HTTPS. In this case, I have to ask the simple question. And the simple question is, why are we allowing SSH on an obvious web server, because it's using 80 and 443. Why are we allowing SSH from an external IP address? That to me doesn't make sense. And the reason I say that is because usually we're using SSH on a web server to provide remote access or to provide access into the internal server, kind of as a backdoor into it. Now, SSH is obviously secure, and it has a username and password usually associated with it, but that doesn't really mean anything if it's coming from an external IP address. And so if I have to investigate why we have a connection for unauthorized access for port 22, right, versus why we're using HTTP traffic, I'm going to go with A. I'm going to go with A every single time. Just because SSH on an obvious web server, and it even tells us it's a web server, right, is being utilized in such a form. And so A is going to be our correct answer on that one. There we go. All right, question 5 for the night. A network administrator is tasked with securing a small office network. They must implement multiple security measures to protect against external threats and unauthorized access. Which of the following should the administrator implement to enhance network security? Choose all that apply. And it looks like we got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 possible answers in there. Now this one is literally a go through one at a time, and it's either yes or no. And the worst part about this, what makes this question, these types of questions, difficult is because you kind of have to know what you're doing. You kind of have to know, right? Now, there's multiple answers on this, and it doesn't tell you how many right and how many wrong are associated with it. Now, with matchy questions, it's like 1 for 1, sometimes 2 for 1, depending on what you're utilizing. But in this type of question, you really have to know it, and this comes into play. Now, with this one, with this type of question, there is a strategy behind it, okay? And the strategy, realistically, is to go through and identify all the items, no matter how small, that could possibly be related to network security. Now, most people either do, they either in their mind, they either go through and they say yes or no to each question, or They try to identify the ones that they know it's not, and then whatever remains thereby is. The other way to do it is identify which ones are secure, and then whatever remains is not, right? And so that's really what it's all about. All right, let's answer this question. I know I rambled on for a little bit. This one's going to take some time to go through. We're gonna do one at a time. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go through and identify whether or not it is a secure, whether it enhances network security or whether it does not enhance network security as we go through. If you need more time, go ahead and pause the video. All right, a network administrator is tasked with securing a small office network. They must implement multiple security measures to protect against external threats and unauthorized access. Which of the following should the administrator implement to enhance network security? All right, we know, and this is key, we know that it's asking us to identify what enhances network security. That's what it's asking. And I point this out because so many times I see students on these network exams or on any exam not understand what the question is asking for. That's what we're at. It's either a yes or no. Either it enhances network security or it doesn't. Okay? All right, let's start with A. Install a firewall to filter incoming and outgoing traffic. I think we can all agree that installing a firewall does enhance network security. 100% enhances network security. So A, 100% going to be correct. All right. All right. B, enable DHCP to assign IP addresses automatically. Does assignment of IP addresses automatically help? Does it enhance network security? Yes or no? I don't want to say hinder because it's not asking that. It's asking specifically, does it enhance network security? And I would argue that it does not. I would argue that static IP addressing actually enhances network security. I would not say that DHCP does. And so B, I'm going to leave off the table. So A is our only correct one now. Implement WPA3 encryption on a wireless network. Would WPA3 encryption enhance network security? Yes, it would. 100%. That is the highest form of wireless network security available. And so definitely yes. All right. D, disable SSID broadcasting on the wireless router. Well, if you know anything about wireless networking, that you know that they commonly tell us to disable SSID broadcasting on a wireless router. Do I think it actually does much? No, I don't. As somebody that actually teaches wireless networking and how to hack into it, I can tell you that doesn't really do much. But it does, and by security standards, enhance network security. So D, 100% going to be a yes. Use VLANs to segment the network into different groups. Well, I think that we can use VLANs. We often use VLANs to segment our networks into different groups. That way, if an attacker, a malicious actor, or a piece of malware gets into one section, it doesn't have full reign all over the network. So we kind of segment it off from each other. So I would say, yeah, E does. E 100% does. All right, that leaves us to F. Configure SMMP for monitoring the network. I'm going to go with no. It is used for network monitoring. It is, but it's not used for security. It's not really used for securing a network. It doesn't really enhance the security. It's used more for alarming. It's more for that kind of atmosphere. Not really used for enhancing network security. So F going to be off the board. I think we're at G, right? Enable port forwarding on web services. Enable port forwarding. A port forwarding allows for external access to internet services, like web servers and that kind of thing. But it doesn't enhance network security. So G, not going to be correct. Configure a VPN for secure remote access. Now this one's a tricky one, right? This one's tricky because it says small office network must implement multiple security measures to protect against external threats and unauthorized access. Which of the following should the administrator implement to enhance network security? And I think that center one is what gets me, okay? And this is why, right? Does a VPN enhance network security? I would almost argue that it doesn't. And the reason I say that it doesn't is, and I know people will argue with me, but the reason I say it doesn't is because it's from an outside source, right? However, in this question, and this is why I'm going to go this way, right? It says, implement multiple security measures to protect against external threats and unauthorized access. And when you look at it from that perspective, when you look at it from an external threat aspect or from an aspect of someone coming from the outside into the network, then I would argue that VPN does, in this particular case, provide security, right? And I guess I'm in my own mind kind of flipping around, and some people are going to argue with me, and they're going to say, wait a second, didn't you just say? But I'm going to go with yes, it does. It does enhance network security, especially when we have remote access. And I think that's the key. I think the key right here is remote access. And so remote access does, if you look at remote access from any other stage, I would say that VPN is the best way to do it. And if we look at just remote access and we understand that we want remote access, then I would say that H is definitely something we'd utilize. So I'm torn on this one, but I like the fact that when it's remote access, VPN does make it more secure, thereby enhancing network security. If it was a pure networking question, I don't know if I would pick it. I don't know. I mean, I would have to. If it didn't say remote access, I wouldn't pick it, if that makes sense. It's the wording, I guess. All right, let's move on. I. So H, we went with yes. We went with yes on H. And then I. Implement MAC address filtering for wireless network. I got to tell you, I'm not a big fan of implementing MAC address filtering on a wireless network because MAC addresses can be spoofed so easily. But CompTIA says that implementing MAC address filtering on a wireless network is and does in fact enhance network security. And I would argue it does. I mean, a minimalistic level, but I would agree it does. And so that would be correct. So our full looks something like this. It looks like this. There we go. Install a firewall to filter incoming network traffic, implement WPA3, disable SSID, use VLANs, configure a VPN, and implement MAC address filtering. That's going to be it. All right, I hope you learned something. I hope I didn't confuse you too much with this configuring the VPN for remote access. But anyway, that's it for today. You guys have a good one. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.